All right, let's be seated, please. Take your seats or a seat. Kick somebody else out of a seat. Good to see you guys tonight. Lynn will be teaching our final session on comfort. This has ended up being a much better series than it seemed like when Dennis first floated the idea out there, and it seemed to be hitting a nerve with a lot of people. Because I mean, you know, we're in one of two camps. We're either somebody who can viscerally remember being in need of comfort, or we're somebody who has people around us who needs us to comfort them. So everybody's got a role to play in this. All right, tonight we're going to conclude with this. Next week, we're starting, am I right, Dennis? Where are you? He's gone.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh yeah, week after next. Next week is the Fiesta dinner. So no classes next Wednesday night. There's a Fiesta dinner, and we need you to sign up. If you haven't yet, it's on the bulletin board back there. Is there a place to sign up just to come or not? Do we? Okay, so if all the places are full, don't sign up, just come, all right? But check the bulletin board back there, because everybody kind of brings something to help out with the meal. So that's next Wednesday evening. The Wednesday after that, we start a new series on Wednesday nights, exploring world religions. We're not going to explore all those religions, but we will explore several of them. And several of our guys have volunteered to teach different nights of that. So I know we're doing Islam, Judaism, Buddhism, Hinduism, any others? I can't remember.
There's one more I can't remember either.
Yeah. Mormonism, yes. So those are the ones that we are including. And there may be a couple more that are thrown in that are closely tied with one of those major world religions, but those are the ones that we will be looking at starting 2 weeks from tonight. So I invite you to come and be part of that. All right, let's begin with a prayer, and then Lynn's going to be quiet so I can go back and turn on her volume, and then she can talk to her heart's desire. God, we thank you for this evening. We ask your blessings upon all of our church that are gathered here, those who are spread out. We ask that we open our hearts and our minds and our experiences to the comfort that you provide. We pray that you help us be more aware of the people around us who are in need of comfort, even those who are quietly trying to hide that need. Help us to have an open heart and eyes and ears to those whispered hurts, and help us to be prepared for some comforting hugs, smiles, presence, and when appropriate, messages from you in helping with that comfort. Several in our church we know who are in need of comfort. Donna Neal, her whole family, others who are facing cancer and surgeries and upcoming uncertainties. We just pray that even beyond what we can provide, that they sense your presence and your close and loving comfort. And we ask this through your Son. Amen.
Well, maybe I can, yeah, I know I'm not supposed to talk. I've got my phone, I turned it off. So it's not going to do what it did last week, but okay, we're going to unpack some stuff. We're going to do a little bit of review first and then go from there. Let me, if you remember last week, I began with a phrase about grief. It seemed really appropriate. And I said that the pain felt at the time of loss is in direct proportion to the level of emotional attachment at the moment of loss. That's something that you already knew, but that's a phrase. Now, let me explain. I'm very visual, And so I thought I'd take just a couple of minutes tonight and explain what that looks like in a diagram. All right, let's say you have a circle, all right? And around that circle are the things that are impacting you basically on a daily basis. And so have another circle, right? You have a circle, then another concentric circle right around that. Now, your life is that center circle, but then start drawing stars all the way through it. Just keep going. Though the tips where those, okay, the tip where the tip of the star where it intersects or touches the outer circle would represent how often that individual is intertwined in your life on a daily basis. Do you understand what I'm saying? And so if that person is someone that you live with, emotionally you're with, you talk to them often, a close neighbor, a close friend, it doesn't matter, but the more you interact with them, you touch with them mentally or any way, the more you will have those triangle apexes, whatever that is. Okay, whoever is math. All right, now, let's say that individual, one of those individuals that you are emotionally tied to, a lot of little dots are hitting that outer circle, all right? Let's say that person is taken from you, leaves or dies, okay? You've heard the phrase, time heals all wounds. That's a lie. That's a lie. It doesn't. Sometimes people ask me, will the pain of grief ever go away? And I say, pray that it doesn't. Because I'm convinced it becomes the blessing of empathy. Physical pain wanes with time. Ladies, childbirth, those of you that have been through that, you can kind of remember, but it's kind of gone now, right? But if someone would ask you about physical pain, or any of us, we want to say, how much time do you have and how many details do you want? Okay? And so this idea of that time, it doesn't. Okay, but as you live your life, there are more circles that are going to be drawn around that, correct? Let's say that one represents when that person was gone from your life. But then you continue to live, and what happens? You continue to draw circles, but this time there is no point of contact between your life now and where you were and where that person is. Do you understand? Now, you can go back in your mind and you can remember that, and you want to. But this is how, when you say time heals all wounds, no, it's just that you are continuing to make memories. New experiences may be in the same place, but nevertheless, it's new. And so this is always there. That grief, that pain is always there, but as you continue to live, you don't live there. Does that make sense? Some of you are saying, what? Others, okay, tell me, does that help just a little bit? Give that idea. Okay, we're gonna put that to rest. Now, can anyone, see, I'm just gonna move right on before you say I don't understand. Okay, hold that thought. Okay, now, let's do just a little bit of review before we go ahead and unpack some of the stuff that we talked about last week. All right, does anybody remember something that kind of stuck in your mind at all? At all? I know, I had to look back in my notes too. Okay, I'm gonna run through a few things, all right? And if you want me to stop on one, tell me, and because we're going, I wrote this thing in one fell swoop. I didn't say these are two lessons, they're not. It all goes together, so we kind of need to review. Initially, we talked about the different types of comfort, correct? And we talked about physical comfort, we talked about spiritual comfort, we talked about mental comfort, right? Emotional comfort. And we talked about that in reality, we are segueing in and out of different types of comfort every day, right? And that there are, if again, I'm visual again, on my continuum, you've got from severe to very minor in those areas. You know, if you have a hangnail, that is very different than being in a horrific car crash physically. And so you've got a lot of variation there. Okay, that was number one. Number two, that what happens with comfort, you have two huge chemicals in the brain. You remember what those are? Yeah, good. Dopamine and norepinephrine, right? The mood chemical, that's serotonin, not epinephrine, I'm sorry, it works with them, I'm sorry. Dopamine and serotonin. Serotonin is the mood chemicals, your highs and your lows. And dopamine is going to be your feel-good chemical. All right, so when you're kind of in your comfort zone, that doesn't mean everything's perfect, but you don't feel threatened. You feel that there's some degree of control, then those hormones are going pretty well. However, if you are in a state that may be slightly out of your comfort zone or new to you, or you feel a little bit unsure or threatened, then you've got adrenaline and glutamate that kick in. Okay, that's enough of that. A comfort zone is a psychological concept. Next, comfort is necessary, but it can ruin our lives, right? All of life is a balance. Too much of anything can ruin your life. And then we talked about that pain was not a bad thing. It's uncomfortable. We want to kill it. But pain just indicates there's something that needs attention. Specifically, we talked about Luke 22:32. You remember Simon, what? Satan has asked, what? Permission to sift, sift you like wheat. Yeah, and Heath talked about the winnowing fork, I think, and all of that. Brings to the surface things that need our attention, physically, mentally, however it would be. And then the one that I stutter step on, Hebrews 5:8 and 9, though he was a son, he learned what? That just still sticks in. He learned obedience by the things which he suffered. Okay, now, and then I asked the question, when have you grown? And it's not when things are going really well. Driven to your knees when there's no place else to go, that's when we really grow. Okay, and finally, we talked about having to step into the end game. In other words, how do I want to come out of this situation? Now, these are the questions, and these are the things we're going to begin with tonight to unpack. What can I learn? How can I grow? And how can I bless the lives of other people? Because I was allowed in this situation. Now, we could take a lot of time and we could go around, and everyone would have very specific areas that they might want to comment on those questions, reflecting on your own life. But we don't have the luxury of time. And so what I have done, I've tried to come up with 3 categories that almost every answer that you would give to any of those questions would fall in one of these 3 categories. I might miss it a bit, I might miss it a lot, but you can kind of get in your mind what you're thinking about. All right, maybe an event in your life that was just so hard. It was like I told you, Terry shared, the God of the bathroom floor. Those times. Okay. Number 1, blessings and lessons from discomfort. That's what we're talking about, because we have comfort, but we also have a lot of discomfort in a fallen world. The first one I have is that defines our convictions and our faith. Defines our convictions and our faith. And the reason I listed this is because I think, and you may be totally different, all I know is my life story and the life story of people that I've interacted with through the years, long decades now. Ooh, I'm old. Nevertheless, we pray, but do I pray because I want God to do what I want? Do I have faith that God will do what I want, or faith because He's God? That's what I mean by this point. Define our convictions and our faith. So many times through the years, I have found myself face to face with an individual that was struggling to maintain their faith. I remember one woman in particular, her husband had left her, and she said to me, I tried being good and doing it right for all those years, and look where it got me. Now I'm going to go the other route. And so the idea was that if God really loved me, and He is all powerful, that He would not have allowed this to happen in my life. And she said, I've prayed and I've prayed, and God didn't let happen what I asked to happen. And so now I'm throwing it all in. Do you see the difference? Do I have faith that God's going to do what I want? Or like Job, even though he, killed me, yet will I trust him. Daniel echoed the same thing. And so I think this would be number one. And many of the things that the lessons we can learn might fall under there, because that's hard. Many times when discomfort is really, really debilitating, we know what we think we want. And many times, and I'm not saying you don't pray for that, but where's your faith that what you want is going to happen, or that God is in control? And regardless, you will trust. You're going to maintain. That's huge, because a lot of people cannot make that jump. They make the other choice. The second is it causes us to examine our priorities. And these are obviously categories when discomfort is really hard, when it's really, really tough, not the small stuff that you can deal with. We're talking on your knee stuff. Examine our priorities. A lot of times this surfaces with our own health, or with the health of someone that we love. And when it's a matter of life or death or relationships ending or maintaining, a lot of priorities are clarified, right? Jerry won't mind this. He doesn't know I'm going to say this. I never knew Claudette. I came on the scene. I was in Oklahoma. I know of her. I've read everything she ever wrote before I married him. I read her diary before I married him, because I wanted to know this woman that had invested 35 years of her life in the man that I had fallen in love with. You know, I tell people she housebroke him. You know, she did the hard work. I got the gravy. I did. But I remember one of the things she wrote was that as her life was ebbing away during those 5 years with cancer, she said, you know, it doesn't matter the few extra pounds. It doesn't matter how old the sofa is or how many miles on the car. The things that I really thought were important a few years ago, at this point, just don't matter. And I thought, you know, I think every one of us on this, I'm going to call it this transition period that we called between two gardens, right? I think we have at some point to define what our priorities really are. What matters to you? What really matters? No one died and made me boss. I'll tell you what Jerry and I decided years ago, our shared list. Okay, that doesn't mean it's right, but it is what it is. Number one, God matters. That's priority. God matters. That overrules everything. Number 2 priority, doing what he says matters. Doing what he says matters to the best of our ability. And on our best day, we're going to get it wrong. We're going to get something wrong, but we're human. We try. And number 3 is crucial. People and their feelings matter. People and their feelings matter. I often tell people, you be kind to the people that you meet, every one of them. Every one of them. Because every person you meet is fighting their own personal battle in some way. You don't know what it is. I don't care if it's the person at the checkout at McDonald's or at Walmart or Walgreens or a boss or a coworker. It doesn't matter. Everyone you meet is fighting their own personal battle. So God matters. Doing what he says matters. And people and their feelings matter. That takes a load off of a lot of things, right? That we get upset about. And I think that's a pretty good criteria. When we're really upset about something, is that going to fall in those categories? You know, in our conference, we say immoral, illegal, and ethical, or is someone really getting hurt? Or is it my own personal preference? You know? Well, I'm not going to go there. But nevertheless, another lesson for another time. Number 3 in this area, we make God the source of our identity and security. Difficulties, discomfort helps us make God the source of our identity and our security. Many of us throughout our adult lives wear a lot of hats, right? We may be a father, we may be a mother, we may be a spouse, we might be a parent. Most of us will hold jobs at some point, and so we're an employee, maybe an employer. And the human tendency is to identify who I am by what I do. Correct? And if all of a sudden my role description is not there, I'm lost. And this is why retirement can be so hard. People can sometimes look forward to retirement, but if their job is the only way they have defined themselves through the decades of their lives, many times they go into a deep depression. They do, and sometimes die early, because that's who they thought they were. And so I think difficulties, the way we're working with them now, it makes God the source of all of that. He is the point of integration. He is where everything intersects. I don't care if we are a child, a parent, an employer, employee, whatever we are. Everything comes back to that, and we're going to kind of end with how we live our lives to make sure that's the case, this thing. And so I think this is, at least I thought this was important. And the final one in this area, it helps purify our attitudes. This can be really tough. And this one usually surfaces when people hurt us, which happens. Yeah, we live in a fallen world, right? We hurt people, we hurt ourselves, other people hurt us. It is what it is. Helps us purify our attitudes. God does not stop the bad actions of people. He doesn't stop us. But let me tell you something. We choose whether we become bitter or better by what life deals us. We'll talk more about victim mentality in just a few minutes. Forgiveness really is what I'm thinking about here. That's hard, isn't it? It's easy to talk about. Oh, it's hard to do. And by the way, a side note, forgiveness is not necessarily the same thing as reconciliation. We mess it up. It's not. Reconciliation involves two people. They get together, work it out, agree to disagree, whatever it's going to be. Forgiveness involves one person, and that's me. Has nothing to do with whether a person asks for it, whether they want it, whether they accept it. Has nothing to do with that. We like to say that forgiveness is releasing my right to be hurt. You've hurt me. I have a right to be hurt and to be angry with you. But I will release my right to be hurt and put you in the hands of the Almighty where I sit myself. That kind of helps that, doesn't it? And ultimately it involves, and we don't have time to go into all of this, but it involves the ability and the determination, and it's hard to stop looking at the event and start looking through the event to the God on the other side. You remember I told you my story last week. I really healed, stopped looking at him and started looking at me and discovered that I needed to do better. I was very codependent, extremely codependent. And so when I finally could do that, you see, I stopped looking at the event, what he had done to me. That's where I was comfortable with that. But the more I did soul searching and the more I held my own feet to the fire, and I really didn't want to, I was in therapy. I know, the therapist in therapy. And listen, I was too old to be proud. I knew I needed help. And I got it. And I had a great therapist. But the more I stopped looking at him and started looking at me, that's when I was able to really let it go. Okay, and then that's the next one is, finally there comes a time to go. There comes a time to go from the discomfort and the pain. Victim mentality is where I define myself today in terms of what happened yesterday. And it doesn't have to be a death of someone. It doesn't have to be a spouse leaving you. It could be just someone that hurt your feelings 10 years ago. Or we even talk about things that happen in childhood. There comes a time to just let it go. And again, to stop telling the negative story to yourself and to other people. Let me tell you something, the what ifs and the why nots and the if onlys will kill you. We can't undo the childhood or the parenting, correct? We can't undo the death or the divorce. We can't, it is what it is. We can't undo being fired from a job or a transfer or whatever it was. It happened. Several years ago, before 9/11, we were boarding an airplane, and it was when people could walk others to the gate. And there was a father, it was a father, had about a 2-year-old child that had carried the child up to the gate, and evidently his mother, the child's grandmother, was kind of waiting in the wings. And before he boarded, he handed the child to his mother. And the child, at that point, looking over the shoulder of the grandmother, was just screaming for the father. Just, you know. And I thought to myself, I think weird things. I thought, you know, there I go, and perhaps there goes half the body of Christ right there. We want to go back. We want to go back to the way it was. We want to undo whatever it was that was so hard. The child might as well just settle down. It is what it is. You're not going back. Remember last week, you step into it. Don't use the mental energy to fight against it, because it's really easier to work with if you save that mental energy and then use it to really get better. Okay, now then, we have a phrase that we use, living in the past is a sad and painful experience. It strains the neck muscles and runs into people not going your way. It makes you run into people not going your way. It's true. It really is. So, food for thought. We only grow if we break through the comfort zone of discomfort. Now that sounds strange. but we do become comfortable in our discomfort. It can become who we are. Fear of the unknown is greater than fear of the known. I know how to be a victim. I know how to feel sorry for myself. And don't misunderstand me. Every one of us have had those days that we just want to kind of huddle in the corner and nibble cat food. I mean, this is a bad day. Just leave me alone. I mean, that's the human experience, but you know what I'm talking about. Something that really becomes part of who I am, my identity, defining myself in terms of all of this stuff. So we break through that when we are willing to look at the discomfort. Okay. Now, and don't be afraid to tell your story. Scott has done a good job mentioning this several times. Don't be afraid to tell your story. And that doesn't mean the victimization story. Right? I think there's so many ways you can do this, but occasionally you'll interact with people and it's really easy to say, I can tell you're a person of faith. Tell me about that. Yeah. And if they do, then you can share. You see if there are many, many ways to do that. But I don't care if you say, well, nothing really exciting has happened to me. Yeah, there is something really exciting that happens to you because of your life now. Yes. You're here. You have something worth sharing. Something worth sharing. And so don't be afraid to tell your story. Okay, now then. There's a destructive comfort. I've already hinted at it, right? We become comfortable in our pain. We become comfortable in who we are. We also can become comfortable masking the pain. This is where addictive behavior comes in. And we touched on this last week. And our culture makes it so easy because of entertainment, because of electronics, because of the 3,000 channels on our television, because of the food, because of shopping. It's just so easy in our culture to mask the pain instead of actually meeting it head on. We become comfortable criticizing and finding the faults of others. This is a fun game. Because if I can find fault in other people, then what? I don't have to look at me. It's a great distraction, but it's a dead-end street, and there's no growth. That's what we're getting to, ultimately. There's no growth. We become comfortable with apathy. Apathy. I like it here. We're going to talk more about that in just a few moments. I'm staying here. We can become comfortable trying to control everything around us. That's interesting, isn't it? It's an illusion of control. I think the younger we are, the more we think, and I was the world's worst, the more we think we can control everything. Right? Oh, I'm going to control my marriage because I'm going to be a good spouse and do everything just right. And if I do everything right, then I'll do everything right. Oh, I'm gonna have a good job and retire with a wonderful retirement. Well, it's an illusion. You ever heard of early contract buyout, company mergers, downsizing? It's an illusion, isn't it? Oh, but I know I can control my children. That's one thing I've got. Because I'm going to go to all these parenting classes and I'm going to read all these books and my children will grow up and they will be the example for everybody. Anyone, you're laughing, anyone that has reared a child to adulthood realize that is an illusion. They will grow up and make their choices just like we made ours, correct? And sometimes we agree and sometimes we don't. Oh, but I can control my health. Because I'm going to exercise, I'm going to eat well, and I'm going to live to be a ripe old age and be very healthy, by the way, through all those decades. It's an illusion. Destructive things can be going on in my body as I speak. It's an illusion. Make your peace with it tonight. I said it last week. But if you, at least intellectually, emotions are going to trail your intellect. But make your peace with the thought tonight that the only thing that any of us really controls at all is how we respond to life. That's it. Everything else is a powerful illusion. And I've seen it over and over and over, and I have fought it myself. As we age, either we make our peace with that, or we will grow old very angry and depressed people, because those expectations that we think are possible really are impossible. It's not going to be met. All of these things obviously involve questions, insight into my behavior. You ask, well, how do I know how I'm doing? If you have been caught in the throes of intense discomfort, grief, adversity, whatever it is, after a period of time, and I'm not about to tell you what that period of time is. No one died and made me boss. Everybody goes through that at different rates, okay? But after a reasonable period of time, it might be months, it might be years, just ask yourself the questions. Ask your questions, the three big ones. How can I grow? You know, what can I learn? How can I bless others? And then within that, divide it, look at these subcategories again. And take self-inventory. And if the answer is no, I've just been numbing it all out, you know, then maybe it's time for a little wake-up call. That maybe you need to dial back and spend some time thinking and praying about this thing. Okay. Now, this is a hard one. How do you deal with other individuals that are lost in their pain? That's hard, isn't it? And I'm talking any kind of pain, usually here mental, emotional, something like that. In other words, they really are in victim mentality because that's where they are comfortable. I remember quite a few interactions with professors in school, but there was one come to Jesus meeting that's at the top. This particular professor looked like the typical psychologist. He looked kind of like Sigmund Freud, actually. I told you I had all kinds of professors, right? And he really kind of was Freudian in his orientation. Like I said, you take it or leave it, right? I went to the classes, learned all the stuff, then I made it my own. Okay, accept, reject, modify, whatever. Well, you have to do so many hours in class, not internship or practicum, none of that. That came later, but of actual counseling each other and volunteer students, you know, in order to get through all that stuff. And one day it was my turn, and I had a couple of clients and he had to watch, and he had to critique. And afterwards, he called me into his office. And I thought I had done so well, and I was expecting accolades. Maybe he could even video it and show the others how to do it. I don't know. And he was as kind as he could be, but he looked at me and he said, "Lynn, you will never make it in this profession unless you quit claiming ownership of other people's problems." I've never forgotten that. I will tell you I'm more successful on some occasions than others. This is one reason why it's a cardinal sin almost to counsel a relative or a close friend, because of the emotional involvement. It's just, you just can't. You just can't. So what do? You want to show empathy, right? So where's the line between helping and enabling? You ever wonder that? Of course you have. You all are mature people. You've lived. Maybe many of you were kids. You know. Okay, I'm going to give you a little trick to the trade here. All right? Individuals that are in true victim mentality, and I'm talking years now at this point, find the most soft-hearted people they can find. And usually they're Christians. I mean, they have some sort of religious faith, because they know that these are the ones that are going to be the most empathetic, the most prone to help in whatever way, and so forth. And these individuals also know that when they call and complain, that these people will listen. Okay? All right. If you determine that you are involved with a person like this, and they keep calling and catching you at different places and different times and going over this thing, let me tell you, I know this is a trick to the trade, let me tell you how to end that stuff. Everybody ready? This can save you a lot of grief. All right, there are two questions. Number one, what are you going to do about that? And number two, what are your choices? Don't forget that. But I can't, he won't, she won't. Well, the kid's just there off. You don't say anything but repeat the questions. What are you going to do about that? And what are your choices? And that's all you ever need to say. One or two things are going to happen. Number one, they're going to come up with a list and start being a little proactive, or number two, they're going to go on down the road and find somebody else. Okay? All right. That was just, for just thrown in extra. Okay. But it can help you. It can help you. All right. Now, those of you that have your phone, I want you to turn to Hebrews 11, or maybe you have an actual Bible. And we're not going... Yeah, I know. Oh, you do? Okay. All right. Just turn. Now, we're not going to read this, but I want you to look, Hebrews 11 and the heroes of faith passages. That's what we call it, right? The heroes of faith. Now, for just a few moments, I don't want you to take a lot of time, but I want you to kind of glance down that. And many of you probably have committed that to memory. You know some of the names there that are going to be there, even if you're not looking at it. Okay? Just kind of glance. Take about 30 seconds. That's all I'm going to give you. Okay, kind of look up when you've had a chance to. I'll give you more than 30. You need. Okay. Well, go ahead. You're still reading. That's fine. This is important. Okay. Most of you are there. Okay. Now, the way I look at this and the whole human experience, I think discomfort, you can see I'm one of categories, right? I know you're tired of my list, but it helps me. Okay, the sources of discomfort will come from one of three places, I think. And if you look at this list, I think everything you see Every person you see will be in one of those categories, maybe more. The first one, it's forced upon you. It's forced upon you. This could include physical illness. This could include the laws of nature, right? This could include an accident. It's forced upon you. It might even include God. I'm not saying God causes. I'm not going there. We don't know what he causes, what he allows. That's a whole different lesson for a different time, and I'm not wise enough to teach that one. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, someone helps you get there. Parents, a coach, teachers, bosses, right? Most children, left to their own devices, would not elect to clean their rooms, take out the trash, or pick up their stuff. No. You have to help them get there, right? And so in this list, there are individuals listed where someone else helped them get to where they were, that point of discomfort. And you could even you can just go through the New Testament if you want to, too, and look at some of those stories that you enjoy. Paul, Peter, apostles, whatever. Okay. Or number three, you trigger it yourself. Now that sounds really ridiculous, because who in the world would deliberately put themselves in a situation of discomfort to hurt? It goes counter our reasoning, doesn't it? It doesn't make sense. For a couple of minutes, I want you to take a proverbial trip with me back to Montgomery, Alabama in 1955. On this particular afternoon, a young black girl boarded a bus to take to her home. And as it wasn't unusual, she did this all the time, but 1955, Montgomery, Alabama, she went to the back of the bus, and then she sat in the first row of seats that black people were allowed to sit in. Well, as the bus continued its route, it filled with white people. And finally, there was no room left for the white passengers. And according to Montgomery law, at that point in time, the black individuals were mandated by law. They had to get up and even move further back than they had been. But something was about to change on this particular day. You see, 15-year-old Claudette Coleman had just finished a month-long study in her school on historical and present atrocities that had been inflicted upon people of color. And on this particular day, she refused to move. That one choice sent her community, its laws, and ultimately the entire nation into a severe and heart-rending reevaluation of cultural and racial fairness. 9 months before Rosa Parks refused to budge on the bus, 15-year-old Claudette Coleman was handcuffed and dragged to jail. Can you imagine putting yourself in a place of discomfort deliberately for the good of the whole? kind of takes your breath away, doesn't it? I think probably most of us at this point in our lives at some point have tried to nurture a goldfish, either for our children or some of you are laughing. I know the burial is the toilet. I got it. Okay. Yeah, you dress up and whatever. Okay. Nevertheless, when you buy a goldfish, it comes home with a bowl, right? And if you keep that goldfish in that goldfish in that bowl, what size is it going to stay? About the size it was, right? But if you take that goldfish and you put it in a pond, something much larger, maybe a lake, whatever, what's going to happen? It will grow pretty large, right? But at the same time, depending on where you put it, it may have the danger of being eaten. All of us live in our proverbial goldfish of our environment, defined by our experiences, those that are around us, where we live, where we work, and where we play. As we kind of bring these thoughts kind of down to a close, perhaps the thing in life that we should fear the most is not a spouse leaving us, is not losing someone we love, however, is not a teenage child that perhaps is errant or angry with us, or whatever, losing a job. Perhaps the thing that we really should feel the most is the willingness to stay so comfortable throughout our lives that we never risk discomfort for a greater purpose. And therefore we miss out on all the wonderful lessons that we could learn. Willingness to leave a comfort zone opens up a whole new dimension of life. It really does. I don't think God, I know He didn't want us in discomfort, but with sin, here it is. But I know He uses it. Yes. I have to believe that. I know He uses it because, at least to me, that's why He's God. I kind of feel like you're at a last counseling session with a client that I've been with for a while, because this is often how I would conclude those sessions. So here we are between two worlds, right? This transition period. The author of Ecclesiastes is going to say, well, don't worry about it. You live, you die, you do what you do. So, you know, you're going to have a poor person and a rich person buried each other anyway. An educated person, and that doesn't matter. Just do what you're going to do. The problem is he didn't know the end of the story. He didn't know. So what is the meaning of life? What makes life worthwhile? Ultimately, I think we need to find the ultimate end game. We've talked about the end game in individual discomforting situations, right? How do I want to look at the end of this? But ultimately, I think the real meaning of life and what makes our lives worthwhile is the ability to look at the whole of our life and say, what do I want it to look like? What will my legacy be? Do I want people to remember me by the house I lived in, by the car I drove, by the education I had, the amount of money I had or didn't have? Do I want people to remember me by the number of toys I had, where I vacationed or whether I didn't? I don't think so. Our history is full of people. Even factor out the biblical stories, which is chock full. But our history that we know is full of people that deliberately left comfort zones for the greater good. Galileo, Einstein, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King Jr., Claudette Coleman. We could go on and on. I'm not sure any one of us will ever be a Claudette Coleman, but we don't need to be. And listen very carefully. If we truly can define the end game of our lives, our purpose in life, while we are here, and we determine that we are going to hold true to that end game, regardless of the adversity, the discomforts of our lives, regardless of what happens to us, and that might at some point involve leaving the comfort zone to perhaps show kindness to someone that needs it so desperately, share a grief with someone who has lost, maybe bless a perceived enemy, or maybe even save a lost soul. I'm confident, I am so confident that every little thing we do in the kingdom of God reverberates through all eternity. And I stand on that. It's true. Sometimes my mind goes strange places and you think, well, it sure does. But, you know, I know this is really strange. You ever wondered the first thing that Jesus and God said to each other? I know, I told you. After the ascension, have you ever wondered what that conversation would be? In my mind, I think they looked at each other and they said, we did it. We did it. I think that's how we die well. We define our ultimate purpose in life. We hold true to that. And then I think as we anticipate, and it is an anticipation, the end of this vapor in this, what we call home, our earthly home, whether it would be a year, 10 years, or decades, in our minds, we can think, I did what I was meant to do. My life was not a series of random accidents or choices. I tried. It had meaning. It mattered that I lived. To me, that's the ultimate end game. That's it. And bottom line, what else do we want? Nothing. That's it. Oh, good. I took it right to 8 o'clock, so no time for questions. No. And you probably have a lot of them. I don't know. But anyway, this is where I am with all this. My dad once said that every one of us is one generation away from a non-identity. And you know, it's really true. I mean, the people that love us will remember us, right? But other than that, you know, it's true. If you'll forgive the aside and then we'll close. If you go to Oklahoma Christian University's library, you will, and you go kind of to the back, you will see a life-size statue of my dad. But you know what? No one pays any attention, and they shouldn't. Students probably don't even know it's there. It's in a cluster of bookcases in the biblical department. I heard someone say once that our universities are nothing more than huge cemeteries. you know, buildings with names on them, but the kids don't know unless they live there, have a class there, and they don't care, and they shouldn't have to. You see, it doesn't matter, right? God matters, doing what he says matters, people and their feeling matters, our end game matters. That's what really matters. God bless.
Love you.
Thanks. Okay. If you have questions, email me, rebuttal me, accept, reject, or modify. I welcome all of that. That's the way I grow. Okay.